My name is Sinja Buri. I'm a project manager at the Munich Climate Insurance Initiative. We're at COP27 in Sharm, and I'm joined today by Isaac Anthony, who is the CEO of CRIF SPC, the regional risk pool in the Caribbean. We want to talk today about climate risk insurance, disaster risk financing for the most vulnerable in small island states and beyond in the Caribbean, and especially about social protection. Social protection has been an important topic that has been discussed in a lot of sessions also last week. So we want to discuss how we can link climate risk insurance and social protection. So maybe to start, can you give us a definition of what is shock responsive social protection and why is it relevant in this space?
Thank you, Sena, and thanks for the invitation, to respond to some of your questions. And just to say that social protection has emerged as one of the most important things, especially as countries continue to grapple with the advent of disasters, which, as you know, is quite prevalent and is happening almost every day now. But shock responsive social protection, basically, it's a mechanism that ensures, that recognizes that people are vulnerable to natural disasters, but you need to plan and to ensure that the mechanisms are in place to provide the much needed protection for those persons.
Yeah, and so we're talking about vulnerability to extreme weather events, right? Floodings.
Right. So as we know, when you look at, for example, CRIF membership, we have 22 member governments, right? And in those countries, we see that they are vulnerable to tropical cyclone. We have droughts, we have excess rainfall, and earthquakes as well, and even tsunamis. So it is very clear that those countries are particularly vulnerable. But even when you look at the context of, the countries in terms of the multi-hazard environment, we see, for example, that a number of these countries, there's a high percentage of persons who actually live on the coast, in the coastal areas, both in the Caribbean as well as Central America. There are some people who are very dependent on certain economic sectors like agriculture, fisheries, and so on. But these are the groups that are particularly vulnerable to those natural hazard risks.
So what can be solutions? How can climate risk insurance be linked to social protection schemes in the Caribbean and beyond?
Yeah, so again, when we really look at it, it's there are a number of things that one can actually do. So we have, for example, a number of instruments that one can consider. So if you look at for example, the government, the CRIF payout, a certain portion of that payout can actually be earmarked, to provide the protection that is needed. When CRIF started out, and that has always been the policy, that the payout goes to the government, right? And then the government can actually deploy those resources in the best way they consider appropriate. But now we can come up with a mechanism where you can earmark a portion of the coverage that will ensure that the appropriate amount of the payout will actually go to the much vulnerable. And we can highlight a few examples of that. For example, more recently, the World Food Programme has embarked on this initiative in collaboration with CRIF to ensure that a portion of the payout, so in other words, they would pay part of the premium, ensure that the vulnerable gets that coverage, and the commensurate amount of coverage of payout will then go, to the vulnerable to ensure that their needs are met and that they can respond appropriately. Another very important instrument is actually microinsurance, as you know. Microinsurance, it has been around, but it has grown in importance. And the best example I know is the one that we are working on, that is CRIF in collaboration with the Munich Climate Insurance Initiative with the support of the ILO. And again, microinsurance, while it can be made available, there's also a role that the governments can actually play in ensuring that, again, they allocate some of the resources to purchase microinsurance products to make sure that persons are protected. And the third one are some of the products that CRIF itself has been developing. I think it was in 2019, again in collaboration with the World Bank, we were able to launch a product called Coast, which is targeting the fishery sector to ensure that the fishers, all the persons involved in that industry, even the women involved in actually just cleaning the fish and so on, do receive some level of protection. We also have, so that's one example, and the way it works is that while the government is recognized as the policy holder, the actual beneficiaries are the vulnerable, as I said, the fishers and so on. So yes, the government receives the payout, but then the payout, we do have a mechanism for ensuring that the resources are made available to the persons affected. So that is one. And of course, we also have other products that we've been working on, with our other organizations.
Thanks a lot for giving us these examples. You have already mentioned, now solutions on a macro level, on a micro level that can be worked on, as well as the COAST program. What are concrete best practice examples where climate risk insurance has already been linked to social protection? You mentioned Nicaragua, and I think there was a recent payout, so maybe you can explain some of the details of that program.
All right. So Nicaragua is actually the first country from Central America that actually joined CRIF. And guess what? They have actually turned out to be a big beneficiary of CRIF. They have received a number of payouts up to fairly recently, as recent as last month. They received an amount of $8.9 million for Tropical Cyclone Julia, which impacted that particular country. But the good thing again, and going back to the example that I raised, where a portion of the coverage is earmarked under the World Food Program, they were able to get, I think, earmarked about 15% of that payout, which would have gone, to persons who had been supported under the World Food Program, to ensure that vulnerable people have their meals, they have some shelter, water and things of that sort. And it is quite innovative. Some people might see it as being very simplistic, but very innovative in terms of how it is able to ensure that cash resources are made available as quickly as possible to provide protection, to the needy. So that is clearly one example, and I think it has been a great story, and I do expect that with the success of this particular initiative, it will be replicated right throughout the Caribbean, Central America, and other parts of the world.
No, thanks, and it ensures that money is earmarked, right, for a specific purpose, and also that quick assistance can be given after.
So correct. So unlike the sovereign program, where all of the payout goes to the government, and the government then decides what the priorities are. Under this particular product, as you said, it's actually earmarking a certain portion of the coverage, which automatically is paid to under the World Food Program to ensure that the protection is provided to the needy and the vulnerable.
Yeah, thanks. I want just to give also an example of the other work that we also do in the Pacific with a similar program where social protection is linked for social welfare beneficiaries, so also on the micro level, which you alluded to earlier, where really the insurance payout is directly given to individual farmers and fishers after an event.
And exactly. And I think some years ago there was a lot of discussion about, can the poor and the relatively poor afford to buy insurance? It was a good question, because as we were talking about insurance for the poor, I think the question had to be asked, where are they going to get the money? Would they always see that as a priority? And I think this particular innovation has helped to ensure that resources are provided to pay the premium and to ensure that the resources are made available, to those persons who are considered to be vulnerable. So it is very clear that as we continue to engage and discuss this issue of climate risk insurance, that we are in fact making a lot of progress in ensuring that the people who are particularly vulnerable to the advent of those natural disasters and so on we'll be able to get the support. And it's not a complete solution by any means, but there's no question that we are making a lot of progress there.
Thank you very much. It's definitely an important topic we will continue to work on together. Good that there are first innovations already in the space that are implemented.
Yeah.
And thanks a lot for joining us today. Looking forward.
Thank you, Sinja. Thanks for the opportunity.